My friend Jimothy Cool challenged me to a best of 3 net play battle in a draft style format. We each have 90 points to buy our team, and we'll take turns picking the Pokemon so we can counter each other. And while Jim will be using PK Hex to make his team, I'll be building mine in-game from scratch, and I'll only have 2 days to do it. So because of the tight time window, I'm going to use every glitch that I know in Gen 3, bar actually hacking, to get this done as fast as possible. So I have a lot of work to do. As I boot up my copy of Emerald, the first thing we're going to do is set up arbitrary code execution. Arbitrary code execution, abbreviated as ACE, is the most powerful glitch in Pokemon because it lets you do, well, anything. But what does that mean? Well, allow me to explain. Typically, when a Pokemon game is running, the GBA executes each line of code one by one, and it's all stuff put there, meant to be run as code by the developer. However, there are parts of the game that aren't code. Things like graphics data, Pokemon base stat data, your trainer's name, etc. However, the GBA can't really tell the difference between any of these things because they all just look like numbers. So the code part will always tell the GBA where it's supposed to go in the game's data, and this is called the program counter. What we're going to do is send the program counter where it's not supposed to be, and then it will begin executing whatever is there as code. Obviously, it's very unlikely for graphics data or something like that to line up perfectly to be identical to code, so the game would probably crash. But we're going to send it to a place where we have input, our Pokemon box names. Each character of the box name is 2 bytes, and one command of GBA ARM assembly code is 8 bytes. So half of a box name is 1 line of code. And if we name our boxes very specifically, we'll be able to type out actual code the GBA can read without crashing. And if we can type our own code, we can do literally anything. A program to Eevee train, you got it. A program to auto level to 100, yep, that works too. The world is our oyster. So how do we do ACE? The setup is pretty simple, but it can be a bit time consuming. We're going to use a Pokemon's glitch animation. Not just any Pokemon, a glitch Pokemon. Without ACE, how do we get this glitch Pokemon? Well, that would be via Emerald's most famous glitch, the Pomeg glitch and Glitzer popping. This is a pretty old trick that has sort of been antiquated by ACE, but is really, really cool, and is required to set up ACE at the moment anyway. I just finished explaining a glitch, so I think I'll cover how the setup for this works before I talk about how it functions. So in order to perform the Pomeg glitch, I'm going to need a few things. And by things, I mean Pokemon. I need the in-game trade Pokemon dots and pluses. To get dots, I need to catch a Ralts, which is a 4% encounter. It took me about 9 minutes to find one, not so bad. But for pluses, I need a Volbeat, which is a 1% encounter. And sometimes 1%ers can take hours to get. So I decided to use RNG Manipulation to snag it. I'll talk more about RNG Manipulation later, but after 5 oddish and 1 unfortunate counter with my roaming Latias that I never caught, I found a Volbeat in around 12 minutes. We'll have to take the Ralts to Rustboro City to trade this kid for Dots the C-Dot, and Volbeat to Fortree City to trade with this kid who really, and I mean really, needs a Volbeat, so that we can get pluses the Plusle. Once that's done, we're going to clone them using the Battle Tower clone glitch. This is because we're going to do some data alteration to them, and if we mess up, we want to have a clean slate available as a backup. The Battle Tower clone glitch is one of Pokemon's easiest and safest clone tricks. All you have to do is deposit the Pokemon you want to clone into the PC and then save the game. Then withdraw the Pokemon and go to the nearest counterwoman and enter into a multi-Battle Tower challenge. She'll ask you if it's okay to save the game, and then a long pause will happen. Then the save game dialog pops up. Reset the game here, and you'll have the Pokemon you withdrew from your box in your party, but they will also still be in the box. Once this is done, it's time to alter the data. And by that, I mean we're going to have to do some Eevee training. Dots needs exactly 17 HP Eevees and 6 attack Eevees. So I buy 1 HP up and then KO 7 Whismurs in Rusturf Tunnel. After that, I KO some Poochyena, Shuppet, and Mightyena to gain 6 attack Eevees. Oh, and while I'm Eevee training attack, I catch a Shuppet. It will be needed for later. I also give Dots Flash as its 4th move. Then I delete all of Plus's moves except for Growl. Once that's done, they are both ready for Glitzer popping. But we're going to clone them a bunch of times so we don't only get one shot at this. I'll place all of the clones in box 2 of my PC. All of this cloning, Eevee training, and cloning again took me around 25 minutes to get done. Oh, actually, there is one more thing I need to get before I do the glitch. The eponymous Pomeg berries. I never picked them, so they're right outside of Fortree City. These are crucial to the glitch, as the name might imply. To execute the glitch, I changed my party to be Shuppet, Snorlax, and Tropius in that order. Then I get into battle and I blow up Snorlax. It needs to be fainted. You don't have to use a Pokemon with explosion or self-destruct, I just do this to feint someone quickly. Then I make sure my Shuppet has an odd HP value while also having some HP EVs I gave it via HP ups. I then use the move Curse twice against 2 different wild Pokemon. That way it falls to 1 HP quickly. I do this on Route 101 because none of the Pokemon here have moves that can hit a ghost type like Shuppet. So now my party is a 1 HP Shuppet with HP EVs, a fainted Snorlax, and a full HP Tropius. And we're ready to begin. First, I get into a wild battle. I'll switch my Shuppet into Tropius and then run. Afterwards, I put Tropius in the PC, so now it's just the 1 HP Shuppet and my fainted Snorlax. Then, I use a Pomeg Berry on my Shuppet. This reduces Shuppet's HP EVs, which reduce its maximum and current HP. But, my Shuppet is at 1 HP. Now, my Shuppet is considered fainted, but I'm not whited out. And when I get into a battle in this state, the game tries to send out my Tropius, who was in slot 3 of my party, because it remembers a Pokemon being there and healthy. But it's not there, so I get this glitch Pokemon. This non-existent Pokemon really messes up the party menu. If I view a Pokemon summary and then I back out, I can scroll upwards on the party menu infinitely. After about 5 to 8 seconds, I stop, click run, and white out. Now, if we look at PC Box 2, I've got a ton of bad eggs. What happened here? Well, when you scroll up out of the party menu, you're actually scrolling through other data in the game, and one of the closest things to your party is the PC Box data. The Pokemon in the box never expect to have the party cursor scrolling over them, and alter their data that way. Most of the time, this results in a bad egg. The data changes cause the game to think, rightfully, that something was tampered with, and the internal checks no longer line up. That's all a bad egg is, really. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a regular egg in a nest ball. If everything lines up just right, the scrolling barely alters a Pokemon's personality ID. And changing this changes everything. In Gen 3, a Pokemon is effectively 5 parts. The top part contains unencrypted data. The Pokemon's personality ID, your trainer ID, its name, its language, and where if it's an egg or not. The other 4 parts are called substructures, and what they are considered is based on a Pokemon's personality ID. We have growth, attack, EVs, and miscellaneous substructures. Growth contains species, item, experience points. Attack contains your Pokemon's attacks and their PP values. EVs contains EVs and contest stats. And miscellaneous contains metadata, IVs, and some other various things. When we change Dot's PID, the game now changes what it thinks each substructure is, but it's not changing the data that's in them. So for Dots, the game previously read the substructures in this order: EVs, growth, attacks, and then miscellaneous, but with its new PID, the game reads it as growth, miscellaneous, attacks, and then EVs. But it's not moving the data with them. So our EV data, which is first, now becomes growth. Our attacks don't change, miscellaneous becomes our EVs, and growth becomes our miscellaneous. The important thing here is EVs to growth. Our EVs that we gained now determine our species, which is Glitch Pokemon 0x611, who I'll just call 611 from now on. When this Pokemon is hatched from the egg, its glitch animation will allow us to execute Ace by pointing to our PC box names. Now, it's a bit unstable, and for the most part, you can only use it once. For example, after an Ace code is used, if you look at 611, it crashes the game. So to utilize it for arbitrary code execution, we have to clone the egg a bunch of times, and every time we want to use Ace, we have to walk the 1,000 steps or so it takes to hatch it. Now you can get rid of it from your party, you just have to make sure it's in your first slot, and then when you use the deposit feature in the PC, you can release it without crashing. I actually thought about ending our Ace setup here, but then I thought doing the full improved Ace environment setup from eShark's guide would be the best thing. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is that it will allow me to execute more complicated and lengthy codes. And the second reason is that the improved Ace environment, while it does take a while to set up, will effectively make each code take less time for me to type, which will save me time for every Pokemon I make this way. So what is the improved Ace environment? Well, it's 2 main things. It's getting a new, better glitch species for Ace that is very stable. It can be moved around the boxes or into your party, and the codes execute when you look at its summary rather than when you hatch it. So it's both reusable and faster to use each time. It's also baking an exit routine from the Ace codes into a bad egg. This makes every code shorter and gives us access to every single box name except 14 for codes. Well, so how do we do it? It's actually really simple, and I'll be following this excellent guide by eShark to improve my Ace environment. First, I type out this ace code, and then I run it by hatching a 611 egg. It'll cause you to white out, but a new Decamark Pokemon will appear in box 10, slot 19 of your PC. Now, I alter the first 4 box names and hatch another egg. The Decamark is now at level 100 and is stable. Now, I'll save the game and reset. This glitch species is 40E9, and we need to do one more thing to get it fully operational. We have to catch a random Pokemon and name it this exactly. Lowercase x, male symbol, lowercase z, capital N, space, 6, capital F, lowercase x, capital C. Then we put it directly next to our 40E9 species in box 10, slot 20, and type out a new set of box code names. We will then look at 40E9's summary, and our poor pooch will have become a bad egg. This bad egg will go into box 12, slot 7. It needs to stay there whenever we want to use 40E9 to execute Ace. And now we have our repeatable, stable Ace Pokemon. It can be moved into your party or any box. Really, you can treat it like a regular Pokemon for the most part. The last thing I'll be doing for the improved Ace environment is setting up the certificate exit bootstrap. Whenever you use an Ace code, after you're done making the changes you want to, you need to leave the box names to get back to regular code somehow. Typically, boxes 9 through 14 are used to do that, but that really restricts the space that we have to program. So eShark has another way to fix that. First, we run this code. This will generate another Decamark Pokemon in box 10, slot 19. Then we run the second code that he provides, and it'll alter the data of the Decamark a little bit, and we're done. I move this Decamark to box 14, slot 1, and that's it. This glitch Pokemon contains the data for the exit code at the cost of us not being able to alter box 14's name, which you'll notice is not a normally typable character. But this gives us boxes 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 to write code with now. So we can use some pretty long boys. And with that, Ace is almost done being set up. The last thing we need to do is catch a Pokemon and nickname it capital D, lowercase n, lefty apostrophe, space, capital J, lowercase k, lowercase l, and put it directly after the exit code Decamark that we just made. This is only needed for some codes. Typically, when you run an Ace code, you'll get the diploma screen for completing the Pokedex. This Makuhita that I put here makes it so the game stays on 40E9 summary instead. Sometimes I have to take him out, sometimes I have to put him there. It just depends on the code. And now Ace is all done. That only took me 3 hours and 20 minutes total, but that's all the prep time I will need in my Emerald. And in the original Gen 3 team, my prep time took forever. It was 15 hours. That was used to freshly complete 2 Pokemon games because I needed single encounter legendaries and single use move tutors, as well as collecting Master Balls and TMs. I won't need to do any of that here though. At this point, I will be starting to get Pokemon. There's a few different ways to use Ace to help me get some Pokemon, but I'm going to mostly be doing it through altered RNG manipulation, but sometimes through straight up generation. There's actually a huge list of pre-made Ace codes here and here, but the first one I'll be focusing on is the Change and Freeze PRNG seed code. This is a code that fundamentally is RNG manipulation, but removes the skill aspect from it. To understand how it works, we need to understand what RNG manipulation is and how it works in Pokemon Emerald. Typically, a Pokemon game tries to simulate random by using what's called a pseudo-random number generator algorithm, because computers, like the GBA, are not able to produce truly random results at all. However, the developers messed up very, very badly in Emerald. Typically, the way these PRNG algorithms work is the devs get a value from somewhere and then do some math to it. But in Emerald, whoops, it's nothing. They always put 0 here. Now, even though we always know the starting point, RNG manipulation can still be difficult because every 16 milliseconds, or 1 video frame, the game runs this RNG algorithm. They multiply by X and they add by X on repeat, which means if you want to get a specific outcome, you have to be pretty precise with your inputs. I usually control this with a timer and some predictive software. But this code will set the current value of the random number generator algorithm to whatever I want, and then freeze it so it does not move passively like it usually does. So all I have to do is press A to receive a Pokemon. So to do this, all I have to do is search for a Pokemon that I want in the RNG calculator, PokeFinder, as a Method 1 or Method Wild 1 Pokemon. Then I copy the seed value and I paste it into this converter, and it will tell me what seed I need to aim for this code. I paste that seed in, I get an Ace code, and the first Pokemon I do this for is an Abra, who I need as a synchronizer for Ralts later on. All I have to do is type the code in, go to where Abra is, execute the code, back out of 40E9 summary, click sweet sent, and bam, there's my Abra. After that, I find a new seed for Beldum. I actually hadn't received it yet, but there is an ace code to respawn it, so it really didn't matter if I had or not. Before I type this code, I decide it would be cool if this Beldum was shiny. So I use another ace code to change my trainer ID and my secret ID to make it so. This is also pretty easy to do. I did it by taking the Beldum's PID I had picked out and making that my trainer ID and my secret ID. The lower half becomes the trainer ID and the upper half becomes the secret ID. Once that's done, I run the freeze PRNG code again and receive Beldum. And yep, it's shiny. It also has 5 perfect IVs and a quiet nature, so I can run a mixed set. But what's happening? Why are all the Pokemon portraits invisible? That's actually how the PRNG gets frozen. The code is setting the game state to that of a battle inside the battle frontier, where the RNG does not move passively. When doing this with a wild Pokemon, that's not a problem, because a battle starts and fixes this glitchy state. But since Beldum is an overworld exclusive Pokemon, we have to enter a battle after receiving it to fix this. After Beldum, Nincada is up next. Shedinja is a funny Pokemon, because it really only has 2 stats that matter, attack and speed. HP is always 1, and because of that, its defense and special defense don't matter, and I'm only running physical attacks, so yeah, no special attack needed either. I am going to be using Hidden Power Bug as my main attack though, so I need to make sure the IVs are good for a max power Hidden Power Bug. So I find my seed, change my trainer ID and my secret ID, and there's my Nincada. Wait, it's not shiny? What? Well, this is the only real downside to Ace, typos. You see, all day, all I've been doing is typing letters, numbers, and weird symbols that are not a discernible language into my Pokemon box names. Yeah, there are some familiar patterns from time to time, but it is easy to get tossed up and fatigued looking at them. So sometimes typos happen. Usually, this will result in a game crash, or maybe some data written to a spot you didn't want. In any case, figuring out where you went wrong can be a tedious prospect, especially since the freeze PRNG code is pretty long. It uses all 13 box names. But after some stat checking, I realized that Nincada had the right IVs, which means the typo was in the code to change my trainer ID and my secret ID. So I ultimately decided to ignore that, and that Shedinja would be the only non-shiny team member, because I don't want to retype that code and then retype the PRNG code. So after Shedinja, we go for Mareep in the Safari Zone. It's the same process again, change trainer ID and secret ID, and find a good 5 IV seed with the nature that I want, and I run the code. And actually for Mareep, I ended up going for a 6 IV Pokemon. The only challenge with Mareep is finding a specific area of the Safari Zone with no NPCs that move randomly, since they can interfere with the freeze PRNG code. So I end up going into this corner here and getting her. This will actually be the last use of the freeze PRNG code. This is because the Ralts and Magikarp I need are not available as Method 1 encounters, and the nature of the freeze code prevents other methods from happening. For Ralts, I'll be aiming for a typical Method 2 Emerald Wild encounter using the normal PRNG change code. This code will set the RNG to about 1,000 advances before my target Ralts, and I have to use a normal timer setup to hit it. This is to avoid the lengthy painting RNG manip I talk about in Minba Lei's team video. So I lead with my Abra, and after a trainer ID and secret ID change and a few attempts, I get the Ralts. I will say it feels pretty good to do a semi-normal RNG manip here. The freeze PRNG codes are pretty powerful, but honestly, it takes the fun out of getting Pokemon for me. I really enjoy the skill of hitting A at the right time. I don't know, it's just something in my brain. With Ralts captured, it's time for the final Pokemon I'm catching in Emerald, who is a Magikarp. Its hidden power spread I need, which is Flying 70, is completely unavailable with an adamant nature in the wild, so it has to be an egg. To do this, I'm going to be using 2 different codes. Put an egg with any PID in the daycare, and then change Pokemon's IVs and ability. The first code requires I put any random Magikarp and a Ditto into the daycare, and then when I run it, it'll instantly spawn an egg with the PID that I want. So I just picked one out from PokeFinder, one with an adamant nature, and then I changed my trainer ID and secret ID to it, so Magikarp would be shiny when it hatched. I generate the egg and hatch it, and yep, it's shiny. But what about the IVs? Well, that's another code, or should I say 2. I want to use the change IVs and ability code, but you need to know the value of the IVEA field, which I don't. So I run an ace code that can read that value and store it in a Pokemon's stats, but only temporarily. Once I do that, I can input that value into the change IVs and ability code and change the stats to be Hidden Power Flying 70. But blisy, I hear you say. You said all of these Pokemon have to be legal. Doesn't changing the IVs break the PID-IV RNG correlation? Well, typically you would be right. Changing a Pokemon's IVs that you caught in the wild often results in an illegal Pokemon, but eggs in Emerald are generated without any correlation between the IVs and the PID, so any PID is legal with any IV combo. And with that, we're pretty much done with everything in Emerald for now. But we're still missing 3 Pokemon, Snorlax, Clefable, and Gengar. Now I could make these via the same codes I used to make Magikarp if I wanted to, but 1, Clefable would come out of Cleffa, which is kind of annoying to evolve, and 2, FireRed actually has an insanely powerful glitch that we can take advantage of to make a Pokemon even faster than this code. It's called Unencrypted Pokemon Shuffling, abbreviated as UPS. This trick was pioneered by my good friend Papa Hefe, and he came up with a name for it when I asked him what the name was for this video. So that's why it's so silly. And it relies on having the mail glitch set up in FireRed and Leaf Green. UPS is kind of like the Pomeg glitch / glitzer popping of FireRed. And it's why we made all of our Pokemon have the same exact personality value as they do Trainer ID and Secret ID. It's required for this glitch. First, we have to set up the mail glitch, which is pretty simple. All I do is get some retro mail at the Celadon department store, after which I put that mail onto a Pokemon that has the move Recycle. Then I get another Pokemon who knows the move Knockoff. The last thing I have to do is get a berry and put it onto a different Pokemon. It can't be either the knockoff Pokemon or the male Pokemon. What I do then is get into a double battle. The lead of the battle is going to be the Pokemon with the berry and the Pokemon with the move Knockoff. I do the battle until the berry gets consumed, after which I switch in the Pokemon who has the male, and I use Knockoff on that Pokemon. It'll knock the male off, and after that, when it uses Recycle, it will recover the berry the other Pokemon used. This puts your mail into a glitched state. Now, when you try to put mail on every single Pokemon in your party, when you get to the 6th Pokemon, instead of the normal word list, you, get this. This is actually the personality ID, the trainer ID, and the secret ID of the Pokemon that's in box 3, slot 1 of your PC. Typically, changing one of these things would change the encryption of a Pokemon and cause it to bad egg. But since all of the things, the PID and the TID, are the same, the encryption key is actually 0. And if we always change it so that all 3 are always the same, it will stay 0. And if we remember from the Pomeg glitch, changing a Pokemon's PID will shift the order of its substructures, which will let us change a Pokemon's species. And we can also pick a PID that has the nature that we want. And that's why all the Pokemon in Emerald I RNG Manipped have the same TID, SID as their PID. So I could convert them into any Pokemon I want with the natures I want using this glitch. Before I trade everyone over, I have to get some items. I need an elixir, a figgy berry, and a moonstone. I could ace them, but I actually don't have to. I already have an elixir, and I get the moonstone from Meteor Falls on the ground. The figgy berry I acquired from the little girl in Sutopolis. She'll give 2 berries, one of the Eevee reducing berries, and then either an Iapapa or a figgy berry. I just saved in front of her and reset until I got figgy. Why do I need these items? Well, they're Pokemon. You'll see what that means in a minute. I also need to make it so Mareep looks like it came from an egg. Right now, it's caught in a Safari Ball and met at level 32. So I run the ace code to change a Pokemon's origins. To do that, I also need to read a Pokemon's Pokeras value, so I have to use the code for that as well. I clone the Mareep, and then I switch its origins to be that of an egg. So met at level 0, which means hatched, and then met at Oldale Town and caught in a Pokeball. This is because Snorlax, Gengar, and Clefable all should look like they were from eggs. This will make them fully legal since, again, any PID IV combo is legal on eggs. Once I trade Mareep over, along with a few other Pokemon for the items, we can begin the glitch. First, we're going to turn this Flareon into my Gengar. Wait, where did this Flareon come from? Well, I actually didn't set up the mail glitch specifically for this video. I did it a few days prior for fun. And in that stream, I followed Papa Hefe's guide on how to set the mail glitch up, where I RNG Manipped a perfect 6 IV Eevee in FireRed to use as the main glitch UPS swapper. I did the whole thing, including FireRed and Leaf Green's ace setup with a live timer running, just to see how long this would take me. I figured I would just add that time to my current time, which was about 3 hours and 39 minutes. Yes, the mail glitch itself is very fast to execute, but getting the ace Pokemon, fast clone Pokemon, and doing FireRed and Leaf Green RNG Manip, while learning how to use this insane spreadsheet tool, took me a little while. It's kind of a big mistake to have used this Eevee, since I could have just used Mareep for all 3 of my Pokemon, and I wouldn't have needed to count all this FireRed setup time. But I didn't realize it until a little bit later. Oh well. Okay, anyway, how am I turning this Flareon into a Gengar? With a Moonstone. Moonstone's item ID is 94, which is the same as Gengar's species number. So if I give Flareon a Moonstone, and then I use the mail glitch to write a new PID and trainer ID to Flareon, one that will swap the attack and growth substructures, Flareon's species becomes my first attack, which is high jump kick, my item becomes my second attack, and my experience becomes my third attack, which is a glitch move. Then Flareon's only attack, which is Sand Attack, becomes its species, which is Sand Slash. Obviously, my third attack is super glitchy, but if I swap high jump kick with Psychic, which was the item ID for Moonstone, which is also Gengar, and then I swap it to a PID and TID again using Retro Mail to swap attack and growth backwards, Psychic then becomes Gengar. And the new PID I picked was a Hasty Nature. So now we've got a level 27 Gengar with Sand Attack that looks like it hatched from an egg. I know this is insane. This literally sounds made up, but what I did was I took a Moonstone, I turned it into the attack Psychic, put it into the first slot of this Gengar, and then that attack Psychic became Gengar. And the only illegal thing about this Gengar at this point is that it has Sand Attack. Once we fix that, it's totally legit. Then I do the same thing for a Clefable. It's pretty much the same process as Gengar. I give this Mareep an Elixir, which is Clefable's species ID. I then turn it into a Doduo, and when I go to swap the attacks, oh, the game crashed. But why? Well, for Gengar, the glitch move I had was fine, but Mareep's experience points turned into what is apparently an unstable glitch move that crashes the game without fail. So what can I do about that? Well, what I first do is take away the Elixir and make sure that Mareep only knows one move, Thunder. Then, when I swap growth and attacks, Mareep becomes a Dugong at level 0. This is important, because Dugong learns 4 moves at level 1. So all I have to do is take it to the daycare, level it up once from 0, and the daycare will automatically delete all its moves, including the glitch moves. So now I have to swap Dugong back into a Pokemon and delete all its moves except for Headbutt, which will make it a Nidoran female at level 0, which is because the glitch move I had was the experience points that it used to have, so now it's 0. After this, I give Nidoran an Elixir, I swap it back into a Dugong, I switch Headbutt, which was Nidoran, with Takedown, which was Elixir, and then I swap Dugong back to a Calm Nature, and now it becomes a Clefable. Now, I know a lot of you may be thinking, boy, does this seem complicated. Why didn't you just use Ace like with Magikarp? Wouldn't that have been faster? Well, between the trading and the puzzle solving, I think you might be right. But the truth is that this is a really cool glitch, and I also thought it was fun. For me, when I RNG manip, it has 2 aspects that I really enjoy. The skill of hitting buttons at the correct time using my reaction speed, and the puzzle of what's the best way to get this Pokemon. Ace doesn't really give me the ability to play around with either of these concepts, but the unencrypted Pokemon shuffling glitch does let me do the second thing. Plus, it is actually really quick to convert Pokemon if you plan your route out well. You saw it only took like a minute to convert Flareon into a Gengar. And honestly, Clefable didn't take that long either. Now, I will admit for Snorlax, I spent a ton of time trying to figure out the correct path. I wasted like at least an hour and a half on it. I actually wouldn't have even figured it out without the help of my friend Papa Hefe, who invented this glitch. He eventually found a path to what I needed, which involved not using the same 4 words for everything. The process was kind of insanely confusing. I ended up swapping the Figgy Berry into a Snorlax and then getting a Charmander at some point and then back into a Snorlax multiple times because I just couldn't find my way. But that all could have been avoided if I had actually just planned better. And listen, everybody makes mistakes. Eventually, I got the Snorlax, and with that, all 8 Pokemon are acquired. Without the prep time, getting all 8 Pokemon took me 6 hours and 25 minutes. With that, the total time so far would be 9 hours and 49 minutes, which kind of seems like a lot. But what about without glitches, and for 6 Pokemon instead of 8? Well, it took me 13 hours and 40 minutes to catch every single one of Min's Pokemon. So that's more time, less Pokemon, and no shinies. And with the prep time, glitchless is at 28 hours and 45 minutes. Okay, so, well, what's next? I think it's time to Eevee train. So what will I be doing to Eevee train? Make a horde of Dittos spawn so I can swap train quickly? Glitch my money so I can get a bunch of vitamins? What about using secret bases? Nope, you can just Eevee train with arbitrary code execution. This code requires you put in your Pokemon's PID, TID, SID, and their current Eevee values, and then what you want their new Eevees to be. And that's it. Run the code. Now, every Pokemon will have a different code, and if I have any typos, the Eevees will be wrong or the game will crash, but still, this is pretty quick. I know every Pokemon's PID because I RNG'd them or created them using UPS. and their current Eevee values are all 0. Snorlax also had the wrong ability for its PID, so while updating Eevees, I had to fix that as well with a different ace code. In total, this took me 1 hour and 11 minutes. This might seem long, and it is, but that's because I was battling Jimothy this night, and I was double checking all of my Eevee spreads to make sure that they were the ones I want. I think about half of this time was just with a damage calculator open, seeing what Gengar's special attack EVs needed to be so that I could one-hit KO a Charizard. Okay, enough excuses. How long did the no glitches playthrough take? Well, it was 5 hours and 2 minutes. That's because swap Eevee training is really tedious, and I do it against Ditto, who only has a 40% encounter rate in Emerald. So needless to say, typing in box names was just faster. After Eevee training, I leveled up my party. In the original video, getting these Pokemon to 100 was the most miserable part of the journey. I spammed rematches against Wally while pickup grinding rare candies and PP ups. It took me 17 hours. 17 hours. Here, there's an ace code to level up your Pokemon to whatever you want. I just quickly ran it on each Mon and set them to level 97, where I would then use a couple of cloned rare candies afterwards to evolve the ones who need evolving and permanently set the level change in. This took me 19 minutes to get everyone to level 100. The evolving animations took a little bit of extra time, and I had to make sure I had extra Pokeballs for Shedinja. I was also checking my Pokemon stats every single time I used the code to make sure the Eevee spreads were correct. But honestly, this is one of the biggest improvements yet. At this point, everyone was pretty much done. I just needed to make sure they had the correct moves and PP max said moves. This is also pretty simple. First, I run an ace code to get the fast clone Pokemon. This thing is like 5 times the speed of the Battle Tower clone glitch, maybe even faster. As you can see here, it's crazy. Here's how it works, because it's pretty weird. You hover over it with the select hand, but the white version, not the yellow version, and then hover over the Pokemon that you want to clone. Try to pick it up, but instead of picking it up, you'll get an invisible bad egg. Then swap the bad egg with the Pokemon, move over 1 space and put the Pokemon down. Then when you pick up your Pokemon, you'll have an invisible clone of it instead. Then you can put it down and repeat. And once you close the PC and open it again, all the invisible Pokemon become real. You can also delete clones quickly with it. Simply pick all the Pokemon up using multi-select, and then leave 1 free space at the end. And then drop them on the fast cloner with the multi-hand and they'll all disappear. I do this so I can clone a bunch of TMs I have and need. Protect, Toxic, and Thief. Oh, and Psychic. After that, I use the ace code to get any item I want from the lottery. You just put the item you want into the code, and then when you run the code you get from the generator, the lottery woman gives you one of them. I use this to get whatever TMs I'm missing, like Snatch, Hidden Power, and a few others I think. In addition, I also used it to get a Nugget and a Heart Scale, so I could clone it for money and for the move relearner. Then I cloned all of those TMs and those other items a ton, so I wouldn't have to use Ace to get them anymore. At this point, I had every TM that I would need except for Thunder and Thunderbolt. Thunder is a purchase at Lily Cove, and Thunderbolt is at the game corner. I got all the money for the TM and the coins by cloning my aforementioned nuggets. Once I had every TM, I then ran the code to give me the max amount of battle points that I could have, because some of these Pokemon need move tutor moves that are only available in the frontier. After that code was in, I spent some time giving everyone TMs, move tutors, and whatever else they needed until we hit the final few moves. Snorlax and Gengar needed Self-Destruct and Explosion respectively. Self-Destruct is exclusive to Pokemon XD as a single-use move tutor, and I use the Explosion Emerald tutor on Metagross. So the last thing I have to do is run this code. It lets me teach any move to any Pokemon. I didn't do it earlier because it's a pretty long code, and having BP, TMs, etc. all ready to go and clone will be quicker than it, in my opinion. But this is really the only way for these two. So I run the code twice, and it is not without its hiccups. I could not get it to work. I think my brain was finally goo after spending 2 consecutive days just mashing out codes. But eventually, I get them to work, I double check all my typos, and everything goes swimmingly. You just have to talk to this person here in the Poke Center, and there will be no dialogue, no nothing, but you will get the move that you want in the party slot that you want. The final thing I have to do is give all my Pokemon PP maxes. So I run the get any item from the lottery code once more, and I can clone the PP max a bunch and give it to all my goobers. And that's, oh wait, actually, we have to nickname them. I let my chat do that because I live streamed all of this right here on YouTube. We have Clank the Metagross because I was playing a lot of Ratchet & Clank OST during the stream. We have Surge the Flaffy. This one just seemed to make sense to me. We have Ted Laxo the Snorlax because my friend and I have recently watched this show and it is fantastic. Ted Lasso, if you haven't seen it. We have Gary the Gyarados. This is named after my dad. We have Chang'e. I don't really know how to pronounce this. Apparently this is a Chinese god of the moon, like Clefable. We have Pistachio the Shedinja, because I was eating pistachios at the time. We have Burnscene the Gardevoir. I will not explain this. And then we have Mr. Khan the Gengar. I also will not explain this. Those are two very personal, stupid nicknames. And that's actually it. We are done at 13 hours and 27 minutes on the dot. But what about with glitches? Well, as I said earlier, there's not a super clean comparison here, but there were several things I didn't have to do at all. Using glitches, I don't need to own a copy of XD, since I could just move tutor whatever I want. I also don't need to try and win anything at the battle frontier, which was a huge pain. Also, in Gen 3, getting moves is something that requires a ton of planning. You need to figure out which TMs you can get and that are single use, and how to get more of them, and if you're breeding them, you can breed the TMs to preserve them. It's a whole thing. Here, I can just produce whatever I need. Okay, so what's the actual comparison? Well, without glitches in Emerald, to get 6 Pokemon, it took me 69 hours and 4... I have been keeping a secret from you all. My Capture DS, my DS Lite, and my GBA all have a speed up mod chip installed in them called the GB Accelerator. So nearly the entire time for the original playthrough and this glitch one, I was playing the games at 1.7 times their original speed. Which means, with glitches, this took me 22 hours and 51 minutes. Not only that, but I have to add the time it took me to set up the Mail Glitch and RNG the Flareon in FireRed, which was an additional 3 hours and 39 minutes. That brings my grand total to 25 hours and 30 minutes, just over 24 hours, which was my goal time. Seems pretty slow. What about without? 107 hours and 3 minutes. It was brutal. Ugh. To be honest though, this is not as big of an improvement in speed as I had hoped. But in addition to that, this really felt like hacking with extra steps. I basically used all of my knowledge of GBA thumb and arm assembly to be able to program Pokemon directly into the game. But instead of PK Hex, I used Pokemon box names. Don't get me wrong, Ace is really cool. I use it all the time to re-enable single-use move tutors, nickname Pokemon, and do other helpful stuff, so I don't have to replay Emerald every time I want an Earthquake TM for a Pokemon who can't breed. But I never use it to alter Pokemon acquisition like this. Despite how tedious catching, breeding, and training can be, there is part of me that loves it. I just don't love that it's required for competitions. Speaking of competitions, if you enjoyed this video and want to see the team in actions, head over to my battling channel, No Bottle Caps. I've got the entire unedited battle VOD versus Jimothy Cool there. And Jim also made a video about this challenge and our battle, so please go say hi to him from me and watch that video. In any case, I hope you enjoyed watching this journey, as I enjoyed playing it. And I hope you can see what I mean by, say, comparing RNG Manipulation to hacking is silly. This wasn't even hacking, but look how much faster it was than doing RNG Manips with no glitches. Thanks so much, and I'll see you all next time.